Hey everybody, welcome back to another feedback video. Today we have a clip and an iteration, so let's jump into it. This is a clip, a couple of shots from NAP 2190. So, amazing job with this. I really like what you've done. I really like your choices with light placement and the staging of it. Um, it feels very natural how he goes from one setup to a different setup. I think that's very difficult to do. So awesome job. I think it's, you know, I really like where it's at, honestly, and I think everything I'll say from now on is sort of a suggestion, and you can take what you think is useful to your vision of this shot and apply that, and whatever is not applicable to what you're going for, totally feel free to ignore it. Um, so I think let's talk in terms of light placement first. Love the placement of this key. It looks like you have a nice, it's wrapping around his face, which is a great choice, but it's believable still. So you have this nice hot rim and then wrapping around the face. I think that's working really well. I think this light coming from outside here, and he closes the door and it goes away. I think that interaction is really cool. I'm curious, if it might be kind of interesting to have a warm light coming from outside, and he sort of closes the door and it's sort of, um, he's playing hardball now. He's shutting out the warmth of the outside. So it could be kind of interesting, and it could be sort of interesting to see how that warm light plays on his face as he closes the door. So yeah, it could just something to think about. Whether you want to play something else from outside. Um, I think one thing that's tricky with these darker shots is I think you're using. It seems like you're using quite a bit of ambient light or frontal light to fill the character's shadow side. Um, and I wonder if, I run into this trap a lot. I think, I do try to avoid filling with ambient light or very frontal light because I feel like it flattens out the character. Um, Here you've got some nice shaping from the key, but it's sort of useful to think about how your character shapes not only from key to shadow or from light to shadow, but also within the fill shadow side, right? So if you look at some like this, look how nice of a gradient there is, from even when how much variation there is between things that are being hit by direct light and things that sort of fall off into shadow. I think it could be sort of interesting if you were to take down your ambient or frontal light and maybe do a soft top light and see how that helps the shadows roll off a little bit more. Because from here I think you could play this even darker on the shadow side. Having it roll off to that might be sort of interesting. So something to think about again, something to try. It looks like he's getting a subsurface hit on his ear, which is very common. This setup, I think, I know he walks forward, so it's a little tricky. You might be able to get away with moving this light back in space a little bit, so it doesn't flash his face quite so much. I think right now it's getting pretty hot on this side. I think maybe taking it down and moving it back could get like maybe a little bit sharper of a a rim from that green light and then wrap it a little more. And then as he walks away, it can turn into more of a pure rim. So what I was thinking is, you know, here, oops, here he is being lit mainly with that green light. And as he walks here, you know, maybe the green light does disappear a little bit, but maybe it can be um, more on the side of his face, and then the lighting setup sort of switches to feel a little bit of influence from the bounce of this interrogation light onto his face, and it might make him look, you know, maybe a little more menacing, or give some nice shape to his face. And then as he sits down into the light, then we get this sort of setup. Well, I don't know what's going on here. This sort of setup, which I think is really successful. So, you know, another thing to think about. I think this frame, I really like this cup. It's really funny. I think maybe you can take down this super bright hit on the table. I know it's a reflection from the top light, but it's a little bit distracting from what I want to look at up here. So yeah, in terms of light placement, I think, you know, those are my main thoughts. I did have a couple of thoughts about, you know, what you might want to do in post. Well, you know, a lot of things you can do in post, you can do in render as well. It just depends on when you want to make those changes. And a lot of times it depends on time. And, you know, if you do things in post in Nuke or in After Effects, you have a little bit of more flexibility to change things easy without re-rendering the entire shot. So I did a couple things. Again, you know, all this is just suggestions. So one thing that I thought, you know, kind of inspired by this Blade Runner kind of look, this is a very common look, this sort of cyan and orange. Could be interesting to amp up, you know, the saturation of your lights here. Gives it more of like a punchy, almost like a 90s movie feeling. Maybe that's not what you're going for. I think it totally works as this sort of more desaturated feel, but thought it might be fun to play around with that. I think upping the contrast might help as well, and it might be because of what I was talking about earlier with your ambient light, where it felt slightly flat. I think, slightly flat just on the fill side. I think maybe upping the contrast might help a little bit with that. And then something I love to do is vignettes. I think, you know, it's an optical effect that happens in cameras. Totally valid to use it artistically here. And I really like, obviously you have to stage it based on what's going on in the scene, but your character is fairly center most of the time. You can get away with, you know, dimming down the edges quite a bit, and really focusing the eye in and away from the corners. You know, I thought this hat here was getting maybe too much light from this light bulb. It's a little distracting from his face. So I think, well, you could bring that down, but also the vignette might help that as well. So this is what, oh, actually one more. Bloom. Just a little bit. I like bloom, not too much. It looks cheesy if you do too much, but I think a little bit of it could give a little bit more of like it takes the digital edge off a little bit, I find. So I like to use that. Use it judiciously. Don't go crazy with it, but I think it might be able to help in this case. This is what it looks like with the saturation, and this is without. So, you know, I think the contrast in the vignette and the bloom will help regardless of where you go with how you want the color to look. But yeah, again, I think you've done a great job with this. I think these are small tweaks, small suggestions for tweaks. So um, let me know if you found this helpful. Hopefully you did. And I'm curious to see, which ones you decide to implement and where you go from here. Thank you. Great job. Um, so we have this one from Mohammad, an iteration on this. So this was the first one. This was the one from a few days ago, and this is the new one. So I think the note that I gave last time was maybe to bring up the image as a whole, as if you're exposing the camera up. And it looks like you've done that, which is great. You've also you seem to have moved the key light, and it feels more like it's coming from, you know, this area rather than it being kind of just, um, a cutter on her and fading off down here. So I think in those ways you've done a great job. I think it's looking good. This lamp on the side maybe is too hot right now. I think you've raised everything up. I think maybe bring this back down just a little bit. Um, you can see it's like kind of clipping there. Um, and I think maybe what it looks like to me is that you have a virtual light clipping this cat here, and it's making this hot spot, which you definitely want to get rid of. But it certainly the direction feels better. I think you could even go more underlit with her, just a little bit more, because it's still it's getting so hot on the side of her face there that it's sort of giving away the position of your light. If this is intended to be your light source, you know, again, you don't want this to be hotter than the actual light source. So come up on the cat, brightness wise, come down on her, and then possibly move the light so that you're getting more of this angle. It doesn't need to be exactly this because we cheat all the time with light placement. It just needs to be somewhat believable. So I think that might help. I think I think you've done a good job with the silhouetting of him. Um, this is probably getting a little bit too. These areas are getting too distracting here, um, like really bright, and I think you could probably go not quite as dark on him. You still want a little bit of the shaping and maybe put a top light on him just to bring out some of these planes um, here a little bit so you don't lose him completely. Because if I squint my eyes, he sort of blends into the background except for these highlights. So once you lose those highlights, I think maybe light him a little bit more. Not this far, but a little bit more just so he's not getting lost completely. Um, but yeah, good job. I think it's getting there. I think it's you know as soon as you're able to move these lights so that this light looks believable from this source, I think that's really gonna get you there. But yeah, the feeling and the mood I think is feeling great. I like what it's doing to this table and to her coffee in her hand. So I think this is definitely the right direction. Great job.